In Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia, it is clear that there are vast tunnel systems that go hundreds of kilometers under the mountains, allowing the Indian peoples to connect between national borders. We know also between Mexico and New Mexico in North America that the Indians have a subterranean system of corridors that allow the tribal federations from North America to meet, even privately, without notifying the American or Mexican authorities. Clearly, these structures are there as a result of some type of volcanic activity where the surface of the earth changed, allowing volcanic openings and porous materials to construct, as it were, underground cavities. Into these cavities, members of the human society found shelter. If we look at our planetary system, there is an obvious grid of underground cavities, from the areas of the Gobi areas of Central Asia to the areas of Malta in the Mediterranean to areas even of the mountains of Untersberg in Central Europe, Mont Blanc, Jungfrau, to areas we have specifically worked with seismology in central North Mexico, and also areas of the Andes. Peru, Ecuador, and Bolivia in particular have underground structures that run for hundreds of kilometers. In Southeast Asia, we know that these structures also exist in the areas of Sumatra, Borneo, and Indonesia. Clearly, throughout the world, there are major areas which seem to be contact points with parallel evolution. In my opinion, Shambhala does exist as an underground structured civilization that is now being uncovered in Central Asia. And in this area of the Gobi, I believe we will find the origins of the Garden of Paradise, or the Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, as it is referred to in our book of Genesis.
The stories that I have uncovered about the inner earth is that very early on in the history of the Third Reich, Nazi elite, and especially Hitler, were trying to establish contact with the civilization living in the inner earth, which was considered an Aryan civilization of a lot more advanced nature than their brothers, lost brothers living on the surface of the planet.
The people that live under our feet, underground, right now,
there are people underground.
They're not all good.
No, certainly not.
Do they ever take anybody back down with them?
Oh yes, they do.
How many people are living underground right now?
Oh my gosh, how many people are living on Earth? Go quick, run out and count them. That's a ridiculous question.
But
how many types is a little bit better to ask.
All right, how many types?
Giants, certainly. People that are, oh my gosh, 15 foot tall is a shorty. And they're nice people, really nice people. And beautiful cities in these great caverns. And I'm talking cities, I'm not talking towns. And the caverns are that great. They're the gnomes, the elves, the fairies, they really do exist. A few do see them.
How do you meet your basic needs then, underground?
Well, first out, the walls are lined with a form of manna. And not everywhere, but it's almost like licking, those little things on the rocks up in the Arctic.
Oh, lichen?
Yeah.
Lichen.
Yeah, it's like that, and you can scrape it off the walls, and it's very honey-like tasty, and you can see for a long, long time. It's dark, but when they do, there are rivers and lakes down there. There's one enormous, almost a sea underneath the pyramid in Giza, and with a big island in it, and it's really a river that goes in one end, fills this huge cavern up with a sea-like area, and goes to the other, and it is called the River Sphinx. And there are people on that island, and they are the most fascinating sounding and beautiful people I have ever met. Frankly, they want to be left alone. They don't want anything to do with anybody except themselves. But it's just a lot of different kinds of people. Dinosaurs and stuff still do exist down there. There are just waves and waves of tall grasses and weeds and stuff. I suppose, well, I know for sure some of it was deliberately placed down there by a race that went to war with another race that lived below ground. The one lived above, they broke their alliance, went to war, and they went down and prepared these cities that the long walkers are still walking to.
Right.
But these cities are just phenomenal. And they are from the planet X. And it's still coming, folks. It's really there.
The Vedic culture, reading the Puranic narrations, it's there that we find mention of the Hollow Earth.
Interesting. I mean, these texts, obviously, they're, I guess, compared to Sumerian texts, are these considered to be older? Because we're talking 5,000 years, and that's just when they were written down. I mean, there might be an oral tradition that extends longer than that.
Yes, well, in the literature itself, what you see is that the Vedic society on Earth, which was once very much encompassing, it fragmented to Druid, to Indo-European, to various cultures that we know, that we think they're separate or similar, but they're ramifications, they're branch-offs. I don't see them as being older than the Sumerian. It's just that this knowledge is presented as something that's cyclical. Sometimes it's wiped off the face of the earth and it's reestablished again. What we see in the literature is that they are shepherded by this demigod culture, by these celestials that sometimes appear within the society as great warriors or great teachers or great proponents of medical science, that kind of thing. So it's eternal. Probably you've heard of the Kalki avatar.
Mm-hmm.
So Kalki comes at the end of every yuga cycle, consisting of 4 yugas. Right now we're in the last one, the Kali Yuga. At that time the Kalki avatar will appear, and he will bring with him men from the inner earth to repopulate the surface world. So in this way it's cyclical. It may disappear for a while, the Vedic understandings, but they're manifested again. That's the idea. So when you talk about age, I mean, how can you talk about age when that's the ideal, that it's something cyclical that's manifested again and again?
Sure, that's definitely a fair point. And these texts, they kind of describe the earth and life and even humans much differently than we consider them today. Can you tell us about those aspects of the story?
These Puranic texts, they describe the hollow cavity of the earth, the other side of the earth, because they're also involved with goings-on the surface and vice versa. They go back and forth, just like we go back and forth across the Atlantic. So they're described, that kind of thing. And it does mention these hollow earth narrations, these hollow earth pastimes.
Richard Dewhurst, he wrote this book about the Smithsonian's cover-up of any artifacts that come through about giants. They seem to take them in, but they never reach display. They always seem to get lost, and they seem to go missing or become hidden. And that's interesting because these giants are thought of to possibly have come from the inner earth. We hear stories about them in various ancient texts, and there's plenty of myths about giants, but apparently that's where they might have came from.
Yes, and not only the cavity, but also from cavern worlds. These giant human beings, they've been seen in other parts of the world.
Are there other openings to get into the hollow earth? Are there special caves perhaps throughout the planet, or just at the North and South Pole?
There are tunnels throughout the earth have been discovered, probably built by the antediluvian people that were quite advanced in the sciences and technology. There are caverns that go all the way through the earth. This entrance to this cavern in Kentucky, which I believe is probably the Mammoth Cave, which I understand they haven't found the end of it.
when I was a kid, I remember reading about what was called Shambhala, an area that people believed was a tunnel into the center of the planet. I remember reading Jules Verne's book, Journey to the Center of the Earth. Were those all talking about what you're talking about tonight, and that is a hollow Earth?
His fictional book, Journey to the Center of the Earth, was about some explorers that descended into an extinct volcano in Iceland, and they went down into the inner world, and they came out into an inner surface where there was an ocean, a continent, and an inner sun giving off light and plentiful plant and animal life, and they even caught sight of some giant people tending a herd of mammoths. So these are all exactly the same things that Olaf Jensen reported he actually saw. So he must have had some pretty good information. So most of the inner surface is inhabitable. Compared to the outer surface of the Earth, we have 3/4 water instead of 3/4 land. So there's possibly more land inside the planet than there is on the outside. And there's lush vegetation there. The vegetation grows like a paradise. Olaf Jensen remarked that some of the apples that grow on the trees in the earth are as large as your head. And peaches are just humongous. Pears, the grapes were as the size of our oranges. And the people there live to be up to 800 years old with no sickness or disease. It's just a veritable paradise. After spending a year learning their language, he and his father were taken overland in the monorail train to their capital city, which is built around the original lost Garden of Eden. And he described it on the highest mountain plateau of the inner continent, that where the vegetation grew even more profusely. In 1829, a couple of Norwegian people, Olaf Jensen and his father Jens, were fishing up north of Franz Josef Land when they noticed a lead through the ice, and they followed this lead northeast of Franz Josef Land and accidentally found their way through the North Pole opening to the inner Earth. They reached the inner Earth and sailed along the coast and went up this big river, which they later found out was called by the inhabitants of the inner Earth the River Hiddekel, which is one of the rivers that flows out of the Garden of Eden.